Well, hey, this is Adam, and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars. Today I thought I would do a special on the unique features, quirks, idiosyncrasies, etc. of this 1968 LTD Brougham four-door hardtop. Now, for those of you who have been watching the channel, you know I procured this maybe 5 or 6 months ago. It had 9,000 some miles on it when I bought it. It's got about 10,100 on it now. I've been driving it, and I'll call it the light restoration here is now complete. So for those who are watching, you probably remember that when I got the car, there were a number of rub-through areas on the paint already before I was trying to polish it. Those are good times when, if you want to practice your polishing skills and the panel's already damaged, use it to your advantage and just keep polishing it and messing around and trying different things, because you're going to have the car repainted anyway in that area. So why not use it as a learning opportunity? So this area had some rub-through marks. The hood had some rub-through marks on it around the creases. This back area had some lacquer checking from an old, very old repair back in the day. There was no Bondo or anything, but the paint was checked. And the trunk, you probably recall, had this area here that had discoloration that wasn't coming out, and there was some mouse dung dropping. So I've since had the trunk lid repainted on the car. Looks beautiful now. And it matches this side, the passenger side, and actually from here over is all original paint. And I mean, you just cannot tell that it has any difference at all. I don't know how the body shop does this, but I use Masterworks in Madison Heights. Call Brian at Masterworks, Madison Heights, Michigan. I'll put the phone number below, but I don't know how they match this stuff, but it always comes out looking great. So this is all original paint on this side. Nothing's been touched. It's just been polished. And yeah, it has a few little blemishes here and there, but my God, the car looks great. This is one of about 111 cars that were painted black exterior with the black LTD Brougham twin comfort lounge seat interior. That's it. 111 were made. So I'm sure this is the only one that survives, certainly in this shape, where everything on the interior is just perfect. So let's talk about some of these features of this particular LTD. The first we'll talk about is this antenna. And I remember I bought a couple of these cars, and people will say, well, the antenna doesn't go down, you know, the power motor needs to be replaced. This is actually a manual antenna, and this is how far they went down. You can pull it up, you push it down. There is no motor. This is what the radios came with. The power antenna was an option. So if you see a Ford of this vintage with the antenna sticking up like that, that is not because the power motor is broken more often than not. It's because it has a factory manual antenna. Sometimes on some of these vehicles, the power antenna was located in the back and the manual antenna was located in the front. So Ford would put, like on my 68 Mercuries, the power antenna is on the rear driver's side, I believe. And if you got a manual antenna, it's located in the front up here. But that's as far down as it goes on the manual antenna. That's it. The second feature of this, you can see, is it has the hidden headlamps. And I've tried, when I first got this car, these headlight door covers weren't quite lining up. And they are adjustable, but they have little bump stops, which you'll see here. So there's one single motor on these, a vacuum actuator that goes to two separate rods with a rag joint to cushion the shock on either side. And there's a little bump stop that, if I pull this door up, you can see it right there, right here. And it's adjusted all the way up. The problem is that the rubber pad that it sits on has just been compressed from the 55 plus years of this headlamp door resting on it. And all I did was put a little bit of extra double-sided sticky tape or single-sided foam tape on here just to raise this up a little bit on either side. So now the doors line up. And maybe if anybody has those bump stops, I'm sure you get something at a hardware store that's a more elegant solution, but you know what, that looks just fine and nobody's going to notice it but me or people watching this video. Another interesting thing of this vehicle is you see it has the York 2-piston compressor. This is a replacement. This was very typical of Fords for the time. They did use this system for a long time, all the way till 1974, I believe, on some vehicles. Then Ford started using GM's A6 compressors and Harrison air conditioning systems, and they started on Lincolns in 1972 actually using GM systems. So they couldn't get the cars to cool. They didn't have the cooling capacity. They kept expanding the cooling capacity of these particular models. In 1968, this tag says this has a full charge of 2.5 pounds of R12. By 1974, if you read that tag, it would say between 4 and 4.5 pounds. So they kept expanding the capacity, but it just still wasn't enough and didn't cool as well. I mean, I find these systems are pretty good. The 1968, the late 60s systems are not as good as the early 70s systems, but they'll cool you on a hot day just fine. But you're using the blower at full speed on a hot day in a black car. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why they went to the GM A6 compressor. Other thing you'll see is on these air conditioning fittings, if you want to add refrigerant, there's this square fitting that you have to open before, see it there? And you want to always do it on the low side, which is down on the bottom. The low side is the cold side when the air conditioning is running. The hot side is the high pressure side. But just a note that those fittings open clockwise. If you want to open them, you rotate it clockwise, not counterclockwise. So a lot of people mess that up, strip the fittings out. Don't do that. Another strange feature, this car has a power steering cooler. Why? They thought it was necessary to have a power steering cooler. Some of the Fords of this era just do, which is strange. And another strange thing about the air conditioning, you can see this car has a new, I don't know what you'd call that. It's not really the dryer. Maybe it is the dryer. But this part here, a lot of these fittings on the Fords, they don't even have O-rings. It's just a flared fitting that snugs up against whatever air conditioning component that you're tightening it against. GM always had O-rings. Ford didn't. So sometimes these Ford setups are tricky to get sealed correctly because there are no O-rings in them. Another interesting feature here is the heater control valve, and on air-conditioned cars, the heater core, where is the heater core in this car? You notice these heater hoses are going into the fender. Yes, it's back there. You have to take out the fender liner if you want to do something here with the heater core or even change those hoses. That is not good, but that is the way that it is. That blocks the coolant flow into the heater core when you want maximum air conditioning, or even in the offsetting on the climate control. It will stop the coolant from flowing through the heater core until you turn it to the heat setting, and then that valve opens and then it allows coolant to flow through. Have your standard Ford relay here. This car is a power window car, so it has that relay on the starter relay. And Fords of any vehicle are the easiest to hot wire. You don't even have to reach down on the starter to start them. Just take a screwdriver and connect the positive and the terminal here, and the starter will turn over and the car will fire up, and then just run a wire to the coil and you're good. You've basically hot wired your car. It's about a 30-second job, shockingly. So it was a little bit harder on the GMs and the Chryslers, but on the Fords it was just about the easiest thing in the world until they started moving the starter relays. Other thing on these vehicles, if you got an air conditioning car, you got a 3-row radiator. If you didn't get an air conditioning car, you got a 2-row radiator with a really wimpy fan shroud and a non-declutching fan. Air conditioning cars got this declutching fan. So always check to make sure that when it's a hot day and your air conditioning is operating, that this fan is pulling air through. You should audibly hear it at idle, pulling air through, feel really good airflow at idle speed. And if you don't, your fan clutch may be bad. That was a very typical problem with these Fords of this era. Another typical problem with big block Fords is the control arm bushings wear out, and that's because there's just so much heat rejecting onto those control arm bushings that typically they need to be replaced. So if you've got front end squeaks, creaks, groans, the alignment's off, check those bushings and push your car, kind of rock it up and down like this. This car, they're pretty good. So it's not really an issue. Always lubricate your hood hinges on any car Fords in particular of the 60s and the early 70s, if you didn't lubricate them, they wear out. The hood pops up near the front of the windshield. They're hard to adjust. You know, the hood, you should be able to open it with one hand like this on these once you get past the initial point, and it should kind of almost spring up on its own, like you see there, unassisted. That's how it should operate. If you're pushing really hard, you're wearing out your hood hinges. This is the wiper motor for the Fords, and interestingly, as compared to GM's, the mechanism here is different. One thing you'll notice, particularly in Fords of the 70s and even later, is that the wipers are audibly noisier on some of them than the GM cars of the vintage. And that's because Ford actually moves the mechanism this way, then that way, this way, then that way, whereas GM has a linkage that just is a continuous loop. It doesn't reverse travel. So you get all of the lash in the wiper transmission on the Fords when it moves back and forth. And I don't know why, but the 60s Fords, they operate the same as the 70s Fords, but the wiper systems are quieter. By the mid-70s, for some reason, they must have just had more lash and more tolerance because they're noticeably noisier. Let us close the hood. And we'll look at the side profile now back here of this car. And one thing you notice is the LTD had this beautiful crown logo during this time period, and the crown logo is pervasive in the styling theme of the car. Look at how the rear quarter panels have this peak, and then you get this surface line in the middle of the trunk, and then you have another quarter panel peak here that really mimic that crown theme. You get it in the body side line here too. Notice how it's got kind of that crown point theme. It's a little hard to see with the body side molding on this car, which came with it. It was an option. And even the hood, you have this power dome hood, but you have that kind of crown theme again. You have the crown theme and the point and the plan view of the bumper. You have it in this theme here for the side of the vehicle. It's just everywhere, and it's kind of cool. It's not on the interior though. Back then, the interior and exterior stylists really didn't talk to one another. To some degree, they still don't. But certainly back then, it was two different studios that really did their work independently. If we look on the interior of this vehicle, this is the interior that spurred the Chevrolet Caprice. When the LTD came out in 1965, Chevrolet thought that it was just an absolutely amazing interior, and they had nothing to do to respond to it but be late. And so the first Caprice came out in late 1965, and it was a response to this biscuits and buttons kind of interior that the LTD did. Remember, this is a Ford, not a Mercury or Lincoln. And look at the door panels. Look at the seat stitching. It's just a highly intricate interior. This is real stitching here, faux wood grain, but it looks really, really good. And this is actually faux stitching here, vacuum form stitching. So with real buttons. Here's a better look at this door panel. Notice this beautiful pocket light here. That was very unique for a Ford to have that. And just beautiful, beautiful design. Super elegant, tasteful, mid-century modern-esque. And another strange feature, this car on the power window bank, this is the left front switch, this is the right rear. Later, Ford would invert this order, so this would be the left front. I do not know why, for the life of me. It always makes sense to me to have the left front be that first switch, but for some reason they changed that in later years. Inside you have the 1968 only steering wheel. All the Fords had this, just a different variation of it. Handsome wheel overall, looks great on this LTD. You have a very tasteful dash as well, and if the car is cold, let's see if this car is still cold enough. There it is. You've got a cold light that goes out when the intake temperature increases, but that says cold there. I just thought that was neat. This car does have the convenience control panel that will illuminate different warnings depending upon whether or not the door is open. You need to fasten your seatbelts. That's on a 5-second delay, I believe. for the belts, the parking brake is on, or you have low fuel. Let's see if the belt light will go on when I turn this on. There we go. It'll go off after a few seconds. And interestingly, I don't know if it's designed this way or not, it doesn't indicate when the driver's door is open. It'll indicate when any of the other doors are open. So if I open the passenger door, there you can see the door light illuminates. I guess they figure you know if the driver's door is open. This car does have the rear speaker fader for the AM/FM stereo radio. You rotate that knob and that moves the speaker sound from the front. It's actually a 5-speaker setup, 1 in the dash, 1 in either door, and then 2 on the back package shelf. This car does have vacuum operated door locks. I need to get a new check valve for the vacuum because it only operates when the engine is running right now. That's a sure sign your check valve is bad. But here you can see, there they go. So that's a pretty cool feature there. Silent compared to the GM vacuum door locks of the era. This car also has the blower style rear window defogger, which is that leftmost knob that you rotate, and it turns the blower on the package shelf back there. You also could get deluxe seat belts in this year, which is what this car has. This is the style for the deluxe seat belts that were color coded. The standard ones were black, but these had a little fancier buckle to them, so I guess that's why the buyer ordered them, because like I said, the standard buckles were black. And on these you have nice little pulls down here. If you want to close off the vents, you just pull that down and it closes off the vents. Very thoughtful features and very tasteful. You also have, I'm going to finally get the name right, a moonskin headliner, which is one of my favorites. Looks like the surface of the moon. And again, just in beautiful shape on this particular vehicle. So, hope you enjoyed that. And for those of you who are wondering how this car was going to turn out, here you go. Looks like new. Vinyl top's perfect, paint's perfect. I had to have, like I said, the deck lid repainted, this rear quarter panel, and the top portion of that fender, and I had the hood repainted as well because it had some rub-through marks. The rest of the paint's original. And normally I'm a stickler for, original paint, but once you get too much patina and mouse dung and stuff like that, it's just better to, at least in my mind, fix it. And you still have a lot of original paint on this car for the purists too. Bumpers are good. What a handsome car overall. Let me know if you like it. Comment and subscribe and like this video. Thanks again for watching. And just a brief little drive with the windows down. Love the sound of that 390. The previous owner put pretty loud mufflers on this car, and I'm not normally a fan of loud mufflers, but I think it just suits this car, and I've left them for now. You hear it back there? Yeah. I think it works. So, it's a pretty sinister looking car. But just a great, pleasurable driver. These 68 LTDs, I think, are the pinnacle of the LTDs. Just in terms of the build quality, the materials, the fit and finish, the engines and transmissions. I love my early 70s LTDs as well, but I know some people love the 75 to 8. Not my favorite. But I think the 68 is the best LTD ever made. Let me know what you think.